On Retirement by Dio Chrysostom, translated by J.W Cohoon and published in the Loeb Classical Library, 1939. On Retirement. Just what, pray, is the meaning of the word retirement? And whom should we define as men who are retiring? Is it those who are giving up their proper tasks and activities of whom we should say that they are retiring? For example, if someone enjoying Athenian citizenship, when the obligation falls on him to serve in the field in defense of his country because the Spartans have invaded Attica, or Philip is attacking them, or some other enemy, should retire or withdraw to Megara or Aegina in order to avoid serving or risking his life? Could this man be described as having retired? Or, if someone possesses a great fortune, should, for the sake of avoiding the public services required of the rich, leave the city? Or if a man who is qualified to heal the sick, and then, when the sick are friends and intimates of his, should abandon them and go on a visit to some other place in the world to avoid catching the disease and the trouble of treating them? Or, if somebody else, on being required to present himself for public duty in the city along with the rest, should be unwilling to hold an office, or assist those in office, or do any service as guard, which would necessitate his losing sleep, but in order to be rid of all his duties, and not let even one man call him onto the account, or hinder him from drinking and sleeping and loafing, should retire to some other place, should these men be described as retiring? No. These men are evidently fleeing and deserting, and there can be no excuse for them or pardon for taking a vacation in this manner and running away. It may be, then, that it is those who withdraw from unprofitable enterprises and time-consuming activities which do not properly concern them, and who get themselves some leisure from useless annoyances, that should be defined as retiring. But if that is right, it is not the man who has moved from some city to another one, or from one place to another, that could be described as retiring. For wherever he goes, there will be many things getting in his way, and not allowing him to do the things which properly concern him. For the fact is that spending much time in somebody's company, and in continual drinking, or dicing, or in doing some other harmful and unprofitable thing, are practices to be met with everywhere, and wasting all one's time in palavering with anyone you happen to meet, and in listening to talk that is utterly futile, or in spending your time discoursing about the affairs of the emperor, or of what's-his-name, as someone has said so. For the fool is not master of his own soul, but is whirled this way and that, and is easily led by any chance, pretext, or association. Consequently, the majority of men are just like spendthrifts, who would be unable to render accounting for the money they have spent, explaining what they have spent each several item for, although enormous sums have clearly been expended. So neither could these men render an accounting for what they have spent each day, or month, or year, although life is clearly passing by and time being spent, this being of no little value to man, and of no less value to him, in my opinion, than money. But all the same, when one drachma has been lost, the man cannot help noticing it, and being in some way distressed, and if a person loses several, there are not many who remain undisturbed by such a matter. I do not mean that they are pained and hurt because of their carelessness, and because they fail to give heed to avoid such conduct as should properly have hurt them, but simply at the loss of the drachmas. But when a day is gone, and lost, or two, or three of them, there is no one who gives that a thought. Yet in the one case they are able to reckon thus much, that if they fail to give heed and take thought of such matters, all their property may slip away and be lost, without their noticing it. But in the matter we are now discussing, men are not able to apply the same method of reckoning in order to reach the same conclusions, to wit, that if they do not take thought for each day, and watch lest they aimlessly throw it away, their whole life may slip away, and be lost before they know it. But clearly it is not the place where you are, nor this going abroad that affords an escape from doing sundry trivial things, nor is it even one's having retired to Corinth or to Thebes, but rather being occupied with one's own self when one so wishes. For in Thebes and in Megara, yes, anywhere almost that one may go, whether in Greece or in Italy, it is possible for one to live in idleness, and to take one's ease, and one will not lack a pretext, wherever he happens to be, for spending quite a good deal of time, if it so happens, in busying oneself with affairs as well as in loafing. I am therefore inclined to think that the best and most profitable kind of retirement is retirement into oneself, and giving attention to one's own concerns, whether one happens to be in Babylon or in Athens or in a military camp or alone on a little island. For retirements and sojournings abroad of the kind we have mentioned conduce very little to one's having leisure, and doing only what one ought to do. Sick persons, for instance, by changing from one bed to another, do sometimes get a little relief, but certainly not enough, nor such as would rid them of their malady. And we often see how even in the midst of a very great turmoil and throng, the individual is not hampered in carrying on his own occupation, but, on the contrary, the man who is playing the flute or teaching a pupil to play it devotes himself to that, often holding school in the very street, and the crowd does not distract him at all, nor the din made by the passers-by. And the dancer likewise, or dancing master, is engrossed in his work, being utterly heedless of those who are fighting and selling and doing other things. And so also with the harper and the painter. But here is the most extreme case of all. The elementary teachers sit in the streets with their pupils. Nothing hinders them in this great throng from teaching and learning. And I remember once seeing, while walking through the hippodrome, many people on one spot, and each of one doing something different. One playing the flute, another dancing, another doing a juggler's trick, another reading a poem out loud, another singing, and another telling some story or myth. And yet not a single one of them prevented anyone else from attending to his own business and doing the work that he had in hand. However, you will object, there is none of these occupations that concentrates the mind, steadies it, and causes it to look with disdain upon all other things. And education, apparently, and philosophy, which best accomplish this, do require great seclusion and retirement. And just as the sick, unless there is silence and quiet all about them, are unable to get any sleep, so, you see, it is with seekers after learning. Unless everybody about them is quiet, and unless there is nothing distracting to be seen or heard, their mind will find it impossible to give attention to its own affairs and to concentrate on these. Yet I, for my part, notice that people who live by the sea are not affected by its sounds, but are able to put their minds on anything they like, that they speak and listen and sleep when they feel that the time has come for these things, because they think that the sound is of no concern of theirs, and so do not mind it. But if they did care to take notice when the roar increased or diminished, or to count the waves that break upon the shore, or to watch the gulls and other birds, how they alight on the waves and float easily on them, they will not have time to do anything else. So, too, the man who can bring himself to reflect in regard to the crowds, and the din they cause, and their various affairs, that these things differ not one whit from what takes place on the sea, will not be troubled by any of them. Nay, we have in this, it would seem, a very valuable lesson and a bit of instruction, that we should accustom the mind to follow reason, and not to let it be diverted to any other thing whatsoever than the matters which are before it and thought to be fitting. And when we have thus accustomed the mind by reason, we will be able to accomplish all its proper work. But the mind that spins this way and that way and fidgets and turns to one thing from another, whenever anything comes in sight at any time which offers some pleasure or relaxation, like water that turns in every way as it chances on a piece of uneven ground, will derive no benefit whatever from even perfect quiet and seclusion. I myself know that when well-trained dogs are unleashed, they straightway pick up the trail, and not even, if all the hunters should try to call them back, would they ever leave it. No, not even if many voices from all sides should reach them, and many odors emanating from fruits and flowers should be mingled with the scent. And a great host of men and other creatures should come into view, and tracks of horses here, and cattle or sheep there. Such a dog sees none of these things, picks out the trail on all sides, and follows until she finds it, and puts up with the hare. And after this, she keeps up the pursuit, no matter what country she has to pass through, and neither plain, nor road, nor exceedingly rough ground, nor ravine, nor stream can stop her. In spite of all the doublings the hare makes in its attempt to put her off the scent. But ignorant and untrained dogs, I find, are slow to pick up the trail and quick to give up the chase. And if a noise reaches their ears from any quarter, whether the barking of dogs or the shouting of men, whether wayfarers or herdsmen, they straightway lift their noses from the trail and rush off in that direction. For all these things, just as I have said, habit is responsible. And in the same way, the mind also should be made accustomed never to turn aside or withdraw from what it regards as its proper work. Otherwise, it will not be easy to rise above one's surroundings or to accomplish anything satisfactorily. Or is it not wildernesses and places undisturbed by sounds, or chiefly there that foolish men, trying not to concentrate their thoughts upon the essential things, have conjured up many strange imaginings, things amid which they yearn to live, shaping for themselves in fancy sovereign power and riches and other such marvels? Some dig up treasures of gold and silver, and thus suddenly come into possession of an enormous quantity of them. And many others make themselves emperors and absolute rulers of cities and nations, then straightway putting into practice everything that goes with a tyranny, putting some to death and banishing others, making free with any virgins or boys or matrons that they choose, and taking part in the most costly banquets and feasts. Others put out money on usury, or engage in other enterprises, dreaming all kinds of bright dreams to themselves just as if they were wide awake with their eyes wide open. Aye, and sometimes, to be sure, as the result of these dreams, there comes from them the most trivial and absurd awakening from such dreams. For tyrannies are not all likely to spring from such things, since a tyranny is not apt to be sought by a mind that is slothful, and in a sense always asleep, but on the contrary, by a keen and unsleeping thought. But lavish expenditures, love intrigues, and such like adventures have undoubtedly often fallen to the lot of many. I may cite Alexander as an instance. I fancy that, when he happened to be enjoying a respite from his herdsman duties on Mount Ida, the thought, and with it the desire, came to him. What a fortunate and blissful thing it would be to have the most beautiful woman in the whole wide world to be his wife, and that neither a throne was as valuable as this prize, nor wealth, nor the conquest of the whole world in war. Next he began to speculate as to who and where this woman of his fancy might be, among what people she lived, and by what means he could compass too splendid an alliance. And so he began to despise the nymphs and maidens of Ilium with a prince's disdain, and to think them not worthy of his winning. And in the same way also he despised the women of Lydia and Phrygia, and those in Lesbos and Mysia. But learning that in Sparta there was a certain reputed daughter of Zeus, living in wedlock with Menelaus, a king in his own right, and brother of the king of all of Greece, a woman whom the first and foremost of the Greeks had wooed and sought to win by offering many wedding gifts and presents, and, to crown all, that she had, according to the report, brave brothers twain, Polydeuces and Castor, true sons of Zeus. So he coveted this woman for his wife. Now, in the ordinary course of events, he thought that this was not at all feasible, but that if some god should promise and give her, so wild an ambition might perhaps be realized. What goddess, then, he asked himself, was likely to grant favors of this kind other than she who held authority and ruled over all that pertained to marriage and to love? Therefore, if she offered him this bride, he thought the marriage not impossible. How then could he persuade her to grant him this favor unless in some way he should ingratiate himself with the goddess by giving her some boon or favor? But he reflected that she did not stand in need of wealth, since she was golden, and possessed all the wealth in the world. Absolutely, nor sacrifices either, since all men everywhere offered her sacrifice, nor would she readily heed anything else one might say or any mere petition. But if he thought one were to present her with the thing which she desired most of all, which she had looked upon as the most valuable thing in the world, and should bear witness for her that she was the most beautiful goddess, perhaps she would consent. Then, to win the victory and to be preferred in this contest of beauty, over what divinity, he asked himself, would she think she could afford to prevail except over the foremost and greatest of them, Athena and Hera? And this would be all the more so if these two should be put in an appearance, offering great and wonderful gifts for the sake of winning. So, after canvassing the matter in this way and elaborating his own imagining and conceit, like a soul which in its sleep follows out its fantasies and imaginings and spins out some long and coherent dream, he is appointed by Zeus, he fancies, umpire over the goddesses, and as to the other goddesses, he, disregarding both their persons and their gifts, and choose the third in return for the bribe and gift of winning that woman as wife who had been the object of his thoughts, and for whom he had prayed. If, then, he had been nothing more than a herdsman and a commoner in rank, no trouble would have come to him from that ambitious dream. But as it was, since he was of kingly blood and a mighty prince, and of great influence owing to his wealth and the dominion over the greatest cities of those days, and the affection which his parents bore him, he forthwith realized the rest of his dream, just as if the first part had actually happened. And after building ships and assembling a retinue, he sailed for Greece and Sparta, entered the home of Menelaus and Helen, where he was hospitably received, induced her to leave her husband in Hellas, and then returned to his home, bringing into Troy the beginning of many grievous troubles and disasters. Thus, whereas the thoughts and desires of the soul of a man in private station, and without influence, are wind-begotten and ineffectual, and no difficulty arises from them, but just as real dreams are gone at once when the dreamers rise from their beds, and no part of them can endure the sun or the day, as the saying is, so it is with desires and hopes of this kind. Yet those monarchs, on the other hand, or of men of wealth, or of those who possess some other power, quite often reach a fulfillment that is both grievous and terrible. And this sort of thing, in my opinion, is just like wind-begotten products of generation. For they do indeed say that some eggs are produced in this way without the intercourse and impregnation of the male seed. And they are called wind eggs, as if begotten by a gust of wind. And this is the reason, it seems to me, why even Homer, in the belief that it was not impossible or incredible that a wind-begotten breed of horses should have appeared to men, said that the north wind, becoming enamored of some Trojan mares, impregnated them with his seed, so that a breed of horses came from them. In like manner, what begins with a mistaken and impossible idea often ends in an accomplished fact. All that I have said follows from that initial digressive remark, that the mind should accustom itself to do and think what is essential to it everywhere, even in a perfect din as well as in perfect quiet. Otherwise, seclusion and quiet offer no advantage and no great safeguard for men who are fools, to keep them from conceiving and committing many strange and wicked deeds. End of On Retirement by Dio Chrysostom.